Hey everybody, I'm Anna McEwen. And now for Bob Switzer with the epic narrative.
Good morning, everybody, or whatever time it is for you. Oh, sometimes I just crack myself up. That's it. I think it's also a characteristic of old men. We just think we're so funny. And generally we're not. But we don't mind because we entertain ourselves. Anyways, today we're going to take a look at the Sabbath and the idea of social justice, because I believe that the Sabbath laws, as they're called, the year of Jubilee, or the Sabbath year, the Sabbath day, Sabbath year, and the year of Jubilee, which was a Sabbath on the Sabbath. Anyways, it's complicated. There's no way around that. But the concept, I think, is really important because so many times, right, people look at the Bible and they're like, God, whatever. They attack him for not taking care of people, for allowing evil to occur in the world, for the poor to get poorer, the rich get richer, everyone's taken advantage of. And I understand they feel that way. One, they have a poor concept of who God is. They think he's a arbiter of evil and uses it to his advantage to take control of situations that he's lost control of, or he allows it to happen so that he can come in and be the good guy. We've talked about people's concept of who God is and what his wrath is and all of that. But the Sabbath and all of its laws, I think, illustrate that the Lord wants to restore things. That's his heart, is restoration and renewal. We touched on it last episode. We touched on the Sabbath and what the Sabbath day was about, and the idea that you were supposed to just spend a day with your family and not do something that produces benefit for you financially. Don't go to work. Don't work the fields. Don't, whatever. Store some things. But, have fun. Do something that needs to be done around the house. Do something that, the family's been wanting to do. Don't spend the day trying to get richer. Trust the Lord that you can spend one day a week not doing that. Basically, the Sabbath year is the same sort of concept, but you do it for a year. It kind of is, it sounds kind of nuts, right? The Sabbath year was to remind you that your land is not yours. The crops that you harvest every year are given to you by God. And what he tells them is you're going to let the land rest for the entire seventh year. And trust that during year 6, there will be such a harvest that there will be enough food for you to store up, not just for like your normal year, which, right, you would store up for until you harvested again. So you'd store up, you'd have your seed set aside to plant in the spring, and then you would start to reap. Probably within a month or two of that, you'd start to gain some of the early fruits and vegetables. You'd start to pick up some of the grains later in the season. Like, there was a whole rhythm of agriculture. And he's like, when I give you the land, when you go into the land that I'm going to give you, and again, he doesn't say when you go into the land and kill everyone, wipe everyone out, and take everything that they've left behind. He's like, when you're in the land that I will give you, in other words, when you have infiltrated and overwhelmed their culture with the culture of heaven, then you're going to have it, you'll have it all. Not that you will own it because of death and murder, but because you are going to be so influential, it'll all be yours. Anyways, on with the story here on the Sabbath. So he's like, when you go to the land, every 6th year, it's going to be a really big harvest, because the next planting season, you're not going to plant. Now, whatever grows up in the field grows up in the field, and you can eat whatever grows up in the field, but so can anyone else. You're not going to harvest what grows up in the field, right? So if you normally plant a ton of wheat or corn or whatever, it doesn't matter. You have a vineyard and you don't do anything for a year, there's still going to be residual growth that occurs, and in some cases, a lot of it. So much so that you could even probably harvest the field, or at least sections of it, and maybe make some money even on a Sabbath year. God said, don't do it. Leave it all there, because everyone can come and just get free food. Basically is what he's saying. For that whole harvest season, whatever fruit or vegetable that grows during that year, anybody can come in and take what they need. There's not going to be commerce based on your agriculture during that year. You just take the year and enjoy the fruits of your labor. And there'll be enough in your storehouses to get you through not only that year, right? But you will basically have to make it all the way into the planting season for year 8 and through the growing season of year 8 in order to harvest of year 8. So you've got to have a lot of food. There has to be a lot of stuff just kind of sprouting up and opportunities for you to eat. And God's like, if you have any extra, give it away. Now, generally speaking, whenever you harvested, you were supposed to leave the corners of your field available for the poor and the needy to come and take what they needed, and you were supposed to drop stuff all the time. And if you dropped stuff, you weren't supposed to pick it up. So if you're putting together your bundle of wheat and a few strands drop, you weren't allowed to pick them back up. Just bundle what you bundle and call it a day. Now, a lot of this plays into the story of Ruth, and I'm sure we'll get there, whatever season that'll be. Joshua, Judges, Ruth. What season would that be? Yeah, I don't know. Season 5, you think we can do Joshua and Judges? There's a lot of cool stuff goes on. We'll see what happens. Maybe we get to Ruth in season 6, but it plays into the rhythm of what happens with the land, right? When she's there and she's gleaning from the fields, and Boaz is like, drop extra. When you see her in the field, drop more than you usually, like, don't. So they were just like dropping handfuls of stuff in front of her so that she could pick it up. And she was bringing home such a bountiful harvest, right, that her mother-in-law was like, wait a minute, what field are you in? This is not gleanings. This is like legit harvesting. What's going on? So all of that was to basically make sure that the poor and needy were taken care of. And if they weren't being taken care of, he's like, leave more in the field. Because the Lord was like, if you have poor and needy, it's a reflection on you, not a reflection on me. It means you're trying to be too greedy. You're trying to take advantage of. Now, granted, you did the work. You're like, well, it's my field. I did the work. We have this great harvest. And the Lord's like, yeah, you did. That's so you can help others. That's the general mindset of what he has. It's not that wealth is wrong. It's what wealth should be used for. It's not that you're not allowed to have nice things. You are. You can have 5 homes, 6 boats, and a jet. That's fine. What are you doing with your money? And we can ask the same thing of a lot of the large churches. We've talked about this before. Mega churches aren't bad. Large wealthy churches aren't bad. But what are you doing with your money? Does your neighbor benefit from your existence? Do people that literally live next to you, do they benefit from you being there? These are things that we ask as individuals, and we should be asking ourselves as corporations and ourselves as churches. What do our neighbors think of us, and what's our relationship with them? It's a thing. It's a thing that God is really. It matters a lot to him, because he's like, listen, this Sabbath year, you watch your land grow, right? You watch your family, you watch your animals, you watch your community, and we all basically live in relationship with each other because we're not working. Do you understand how crazy that is? All of these farmers, all of these vineyard owners, all of these guys that normally have a job, they don't have a job, but they're not wanting for food because they can go to the fields and glean whatever it is that they want. They can harvest whatever is available. They don't have to pay for it. You don't work the land. You don't sell the excess. And if you have a bunch of food stored up, right, then you just, you enjoy it because it came from year 6. And if the field runs out of food, then you bring what you have stored up into the field so people can enjoy it. Honestly, it had to look so weird. It has to feel so weird. I'm just trying to think of it like in a corporate setting, right? Well, we're not all farmers, Bob. I know. So what would you do for a Sabbath year? I would imagine the crops would be the same as like profits. Like what you do, you give everybody a year's salary. I'm just spitballing here. I mean, how nuts would that be? You'd say, well, Bob, you'd lose your business. You'd lose all your clients. I know. I don't know how to explain it to you. I think our system is built our system is built in such a way that to step into this Sabbath mindset would be revolutionary, and there'd be a lot of loss because people have been taking advantage of it for so long that it would look like a total reset, basically. But I believe it's possible. I really do. The principle is awesome. And that's once every 6 years of planting, your 6th year of planting, right? You have year 7 where you just eat what you can, and then you have to springtime of year 8 is when you start planting again. And then you count, 7 more years. And then as you count that, you eventually get to year 49. And now we start the year of Jubilee. And what does that mean? After 49 years of Sabbaths, the 50th year is a restoration year. Now, this is where it gets really interesting when people, and there are already, cities and a few states that have talked about and maybe have already started programs of reparations for slavery. And there are those that, they want to start with like $15 billion in restoration, and then they want, yearly increases, and it goes on and on because this principle was lost somewhere along the line. But here was the beauty of the year of Jubilee. All land that you sold is returned back to you. Basically all family land. So God's like, well, I'm going to give you the land. Land's going to be divided up amongst each family. Each family will have this land to work. If you've come along the way, or you want to do something with your land, like sell it and do something else, you can do that. But in the year of Jubilee, that land comes back to you. It's just given back to you. Now you can't plant on it, you can't harvest on it for back-to-back years. So year 49 is a regular Sabbath year. And now year 50 is a year of Jubilee. So that's another year that all the fields are left to just do what they want to do. And all the fields, regardless of, planting or their planting schedule, don't do anything. That's so it's arrested now for 2 full years, and you don't harvest again until the 3rd year, which means you are going to be overwhelmed with what happens here in verse, what is it? Verse 15 and 16. Don't take advantage Oh, yeah, there you go. So, verse 15, you are to buy from your own people on the basis of the numbers of years of Jubilee, and they are to sell it to you on the basis of numbers of years left in the harvesting of crops. When the years are many, you are to increase the price. When they are few, you are to decrease the price, because that what's going on is really being sold to you is the number of crops. So your land, your harvesting land was based on the number of harvests, the number of times you could harvest it before the year of Jubilee, because you were going to have to give the land back. And of course, you didn't harvest on the 7th years anyway. So real estate was bought and sold based on the Sabbath and the year of Jubilee. And if you sold it right after the year of Jubilee, then people could say, all right, I got, 7 rounds, 7 rounds of 6 years of harvest before I need to give this back. I think I said that right. There's math people out there that are right now going, wait, no, Bob, this is okay, fine. You do the math, but that's how you would sell the property. So it would be worth more. But if you are 2 years away from Jubilee and you're in real need of money, or maybe you're doing really well and you would like to increase your harvest for the next couple of years, so you just want to buy your neighbor's property, you can basically buy it, some would almost say rent it for 2 years, because you're going to have to give it back during the year of Jubilee. So you could rent it, you could harvest it for 2 more years. The 49th year, anybody could eat out of it. The 50th year, anyone could eat out of it. It's still yours. But then on the 50th, after the 50th round, then you give it back to the person you bought it from. So all prices were supposed to be based on that. And that was not only for the buyer's safety, but also for the seller to not take advantage. Because somebody might come to them in desperate need and they can say, well, whatever. They take advantage. God's like, don't take advantage of one another. That's what God says. Matter of fact, verse 17 actually says, do not take advantage of one another, but fear God, for I'm the Lord your God. Follow my decrees. Remember, we talked about that. That means create my culture. Develop these traditions so that people understand that this is who I am. Then the land will yield its fruit, and you will eat your fill and live there in safety. You may ask, what am I going to eat on the 7th year if I do not plant or harvest for our crops? I will send you, verse 21, such a blessing in the 6th year that the land will yield through the 3 years. You will yield enough, for 3 years. While you plant during the 8th year, you will eat from the old crop and will continue to eat from it until the harvest of the 9th year comes in. The land must not be sold permanently, because the land is mine and you reside in it as foreigners and strangers. Oh, man. You must provide for the redemption of the land. If one of your fellow Israelites becomes poor and sells some of their property, and their nearest relative is to come and redeem what they have sold. However, if no one is there to redeem it for them, but after they later on they prosper and acquire enough sufficient means to redeem it for themselves, you determine the value of the land since they sold it and refund the balance to them, to the one whom they sold it. They can go back to their own property. See, so everything's based on the harvest, not on some arbitrary number that the person who bought it now decides that it's worth. It has to do with the harvests, the ones that you've had and the ones that are left. But if they do not acquire the means to repay, what is sold will remain in the possession of the buyer until the year of Jubilee. It will be returned in the Jubilee, and they can go back to their own property. Anyone who sells a house in a walled city retains the right of redemption a full year after its sale, during which time the seller may redeem it. So, again, pretty easy, right? You sell a house because you have to. God's like, you have a full year to buy it back at basically at the same price. Like you can't take advantage of that. If it's not redeemed before the year is fully passed, the house in the walled city shall become permanently to the buyer and the buyer's descendants. It is not to be returned in the year of Jubilee. But houses and villages without walls around them are to be considered as belonging to the open country. They can be redeemed and to be returned in the year of Jubilee. Just in case you have a piece of property, you don't want to live there anymore, you want to live in the city, you buy a house in the walled city. You're enjoying that house. Year of Jubilee comes along. People are like, all right, here's your land back. All right, fine. I don't want to live there. I have a place in a walled city. That's where I want to live. So they just leave the land to grow as it grows. When it's all done, after the year of Jubilee, they can sell that land again to whoever wants to plant and harvest on it. So the land was always going to come back to you. Even if you bought a house in the walled city, what didn't get returned was if you bought a house in the walled city and the person did not redeem it after 1 year, then the house became permanently yours. You didn't have to give that back to them during the year of Jubilee. But if you had a house in the country alongside your fields, a farmhouse, so to speak, that belonged to the land. That went with the land. So if they bought your land, they bought the house. When the year of Jubilee came, you got the house and the land back. It's a fascinating world. It really, really is. I love having the conversation around it because it's all about the Lord's like, this is how we take care of the poor and how you take care of your land. Like, this is what's valuable. In verses 18 and again in 36, basically the Lord says again, like, you follow my traditions, you follow these decrees, and the land will just produce massive amounts of crops for you. If you don't, bad things can happen because you open yourself up to the whims of the enemy, and they're going to tell you to take advantage of people. Greed will come in, jealousy will come in, defensiveness will come in. It gets ugly. It gets ugly. I read all that. Verse, the Lord had bought it out of Egypt. I'm the Lord your God who brought you up out of Egypt. Now we're talking about slavery. If any of your fellow Israelites become poor and sell themselves to you, do not make them work as slaves. They are to be treated as hired workers or temporary residents among you. They are to work for you until the year of Jubilee. Then they and their children are to be released. They are to go back to their own clans and to the property of their ancestors. Because the Israelites are my servants who I brought up out of Egypt. They must not be sold as slaves. Do not rule over them ruthlessly, but fear your God. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you as members of their clan born in your country, and they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as an inheritance. If a foreigner is residing among you and you become rich, and fellow Israelites become poor and sell themselves to the foreigners or a member of the foreign clan, they retain the right of redemption after they've sold themselves. One of their relatives may redeem them. They and their buyer are to count the time from the year they sold themselves to the year of Jubilee. The price of their release is based on the rate paid to the hire worker for that number of years. For many years remain, they must pay a higher price. If not many years remain, a much lower one. So even slavery was for a lot of people, that was a viable way to provide for their family. And they'd sell their children, they'd sell themselves into slavery. And the Lord's like, don't take advantage of that. Treat them like a hired hand. Don't beat them. Give them what they need. And when it's all done, send them back to their land with everything they need to set things up again. Now, I do understand that it gets kind of uncomfortable to talk about the fact that God seems to be giving you principles of slavery here. That if you buy a foreigner, they're yours forever. But if you buy Hebrew, you have to give them back at the year of Jubilee, and the price of that Hebrew slave is based on when the year of Jubilee is coming up. I believe what the Lord's saying here is, listen, this is a slavery, I think culturally is very similar to getting yourself a job. You get yourself employed. You bring yourself to a farm and you say, "Hey, I'm willing to be your slave. I'll work here." Or you're a farmer and you go to a slave market and you're like, "I need some workers." This was not necessarily a culture that was considered demeaning to be a slave. It was what you did in order to obtain what was necessary in order to live. Now, religious leaders would take advantage of, as usual, right? Religion always does that. They would take advantage of these rules, and they would use their powers to take advantage of people in this way. The Israelites belong to me as servants. They are my servants who are brought up out of Egypt. I'm the Lord your God. I don't know why I just read that. Why was verse 55 written there? Do you owe service to them? Do not rule over them ruthlessly. I'm not sure why I wrote that verse. Sorry. The principle that the Lord gets across here is that your land will be open to the results of sin, as well as your family and your houses, if you don't treat each other well, if you don't take care of each other, and if you don't return things that belong to them. And religious leaders would use that concept to strip away wealthy people from their inheritance in their land. They would say to wealthy people, "Hey, you didn't follow the year of Jubilee on that particular piece of property, and so now it belongs to us, or we will give it to somebody that we like." And they would weaponize the year of Jubilee. See, even a beautiful principle of God can be turned into something he never intended it to be. But religious leaders did that. And they would use the wealthy people, they would take advantage of wealthy people, and they would redistribute it to the poor based on their whims in order to obtain loyalty from those who were in need of property. Now, some people believe that the 70-year exile into Babylon later on in the Bible is actually, quote, God giving the land the rest that the Israelites had failed to follow through on for years. They had failed. The year of Jubilee had disappeared. The Sabbath year had disappeared. People were taking advantage of nuances of that. They would rotate land and never actually have land that was resting for an entire year. It was all kinds of craziness going on. And some people believe that the exile into Babylon was God's way of forcing the 70 years of exile was actually all addition. They added all up and they're like, that's how many years the land was supposed to rest. I don't particularly think that, but there are people. We'll deal with those details when we get to those stories. But the poor people were never supposed to be treated with the idea of profit involved for yourself. No ministry should be making money off of poor people. No family should be making money off of poor people. No tribe was to make money off of the poor in their tribe. We have entire ministries currently in our country that make money off of poor people. They exploit them, expose them, take advantage of them, and then collect millions and millions of dollars in their name. And the poor people do not get the full benefit of all of that. And I don't need to give you a list. I don't. You can see it all over the place. Nonprofits, that you can look those up. Like what percentage of the giving goes to the actual activities? And some are like less than 10% actually go to the poor. The rest is all infrastructure and office buildings and salaries and benefits. It's It's bizarre. That's not the point of God here. You don't take advantage of the poor. Not just like, well, don't be mean to them. It's like, no, don't. The whole nuance here is don't take advantage of them. Don't turn their plight into your benefit. Your benefit is designed to be for them. And their plight is a reflection of your character and of the culture that you're developing. And if their plight is not alleviated by your presence, then you're missing the culture of heaven. This is not about everyone has to get, what is that? Socialism, where the theoretical, or communism. Socialism leads to communism, but it's not the idea that everybody gets the same and everybody just, we're all just drones. No, there's all kinds of variables in how much people make and how they live, etc. But the Lord's like, look at the poor, and the way that their plight is handled is a reflection of you, because the reflection of heaven, their plight is they are not taken advantage of, and they are redeemed, and they are restored, and they are brought to a place of health, even if they sold themselves into slavery, even if they, wanted to be taken advantage of. Don't. The slaves get released. Jewish slaves were provided for. Redemption was always the goal. Non-Jewish owners of Jews, I don't know if you caught that, they had to also participate in the year of Jubilee. And the whole idea of Jubilee carries with it the notion of movement. Most Jews moved about the land freely and joyfully. They ate with others. They interacted with families on the regular. And the year of Jubilee was like, let's bring everyone back home, because everyone's been moving all over the place. Let's bring everyone back home and let's spend a year just hanging out together again. You've traveled the country. You've set up businesses all over the country. Come back to your land and hang out with the family. Don't buy, don't sell, don't plant, don't weed, don't harvest. Just go out every day and see what the Lord's provided. It's a fascinating concept when you talk about the laws of the Sabbath and how it impacts social justice. And I'm not saying we should, I don't know what I'm saying, but I think that you have the opportunity to interact with this concept that it's a concept of heaven, that he wanted so ingrained into the culture of the people of his nation, that as they incorporated their principles into the rest of the world would look around and go, wow, if we follow those principles, look how much harvest we will have on year 6. If we follow those principles, look at how tight our family will become, because every year we kind of just hang out. We have no work in essence to do. Not no work. I'm sure they did work. I'm sure there were things that you could do, and I'm sure you planned ahead knowing, all right, I got a Sabbath year coming. I'm going to build this for the family. We're going to go on vacation. We're going to all this kind of, like, there were things to do. You didn't just sit around, meditating. But you did a lot more meditating. You had a lot more peace. You did not have the pressure of life. And it brings about that principle of the poor in a whole new realm. What does it look like? And how is that a reflection of me? And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to end this episode of The Epic Narrative. I'll see you next week.
Don't go anywhere. We've got Bob thoughts.
All right. Listen, these thoughts have nothing to do with the episode. So if you have specific things you want to ask me about it, feel free to contact me at the Bob Switzer at gmail.com, and I will reply. But so I just have a couple stories. So this is now a while ago because we've been on, this particular story started before we took our winter break. So it's been a little while in the making. So our dog, as you all know, his name's Zacapa. Generally, people we just call him Cappy. And he responds great to that. Anyways, so he is never, up until the beginning, this story, he had never been a problem in the house, being free in the house. And granted, it's a 300 square foot RV, so it's not a big house for him to get in trouble in. But we came home one day, and he had been a bad boy. Like, he had gotten in the trash and spread it all over the place. And then he got on both of our end tables. So I have my chair. Even in the RV, I got my chair, and Lori has hers. And we both have a little end tables, and we have the things we keep on them. We're just probably like a lot of old people, but old people like me. So we're doing all, like, he got on both things. He knocked over the water. He pushed her books off the counter. He didn't chew them, but he pushed the books off. Anyways, all this is going on, and we're like, you're a bad boy. You were so naughty, and he knew. Dogs just know. Like, he had that squinty eye, like, please, I didn't mean, like, I couldn't help myself, whatever. Anyway, so we cleaned everything up. And then my wife goes up the couple steps into the bedroom, and there she discovers my retainer. Now, my retainer is... It's a veneer. We bought it, as a lot of you know. I lost my two bottom lower teeth a year ago, over a year ago, and we haven't been able to replace them because we don't stay anywhere long enough. And that just don't get me started on the whole like crazy broken system, for the dentist. It's like, it just drives me. Okay, so every dentist wants their own x-rays and then wants their own CAT scan. It's like, no, I have it on a disc. Like, I could just bring it to you. You can see how thick the bone is, and you can put the implants in. And they're like, no, why don't you come in first for a cleaning, and then we'll do an x-ray, and then in a few months we'll bring you back, and you can have the, then we'll start the process. And some guys want to put a big bolt in there and then stretch the gums over the top of it, and others want to put fake bone in there and then that'll take 3 months to heal. Then we'll put the big bolt in there, and then we'll and it's like, it's always going to be about a year process and about $10,000. It doesn't matter. I looked at micros. It just one time we were at a dentist, had him looking at it, and he did micro implants, and he was like, you know what, I can start today. He said, honestly, if you want to, I can put two mini bolts in. I call them bolts, whatever they are, mini implants in there, and we'll just call it a day. You can come back in 3 months, and we'll put that should heal it up, and then we'll measure. We'll get the put the thing on order, but that'll take about 3 weeks. But we'll give you temporary ones until those come in, and then 3 weeks later we'll just we'll put your new teeth in. You should be done in it should be maybe a total of 3 months. And it was only gonna cost me like $6,000, maybe $7,000. And I forget why I do, but in the moment, I mean, I want these teeth replaced so bad, but it was like, we just couldn't. So we didn't. And I think, but that guy's way up in New Jersey. I'm not going to be up there that I know of for that long period of time. Doesn't matter. Move on, Bob. So these implants, not implants, this veneer is something we literally got off of Facebook, and it pops on, it covers all my bottom teeth, but for me, it keeps that space from closing, because as you know, the teeth would just slowly inch their way either toward the middle or whatever, and then you end up with more troubles. I don't want no more troubles. So I got the veneer, and I call it a retainer because that's really what it's doing for me. So my wife finds that, back to the story, my wife finds that on the ground, chewed Like he'd shoot it up. Oh my gosh. So right away, like within minutes, I'm back on the internet. Contact the people who made it. They sent me a replacement one, but it's going to cost. I mean, not cost, whatever the cost was, a couple $100. But I was 2 weeks away from doing a wedding, and I really wanted it for the wedding, right? And I thought you could pay extra, guarantee it in a week, and I didn't. So it showed up on the day that I got my plane ride out. So I didn't. I was missing my 2 front teeth for the wedding, but it wasn't my wedding, so it really didn't matter. I was in like one photo. No big deal. I mean, I'm sure I'm in other people's photos, but official photos. Oh, too funny. It doesn't really show when I smile, but it shows when I talk. On with the show. So yeah, so now I have my new veneers, and I think I talk normaler when they're in, because without them, I notice a lisp. When I listen to these recordings of season 4, I can hear the lisp. I know what days I wasn't wearing my retainer. I'm like, oh man, Bob, you really should have put your retainer in every time. But sometimes I forgot. Anyways, so yeah, so now that's the story of the dog eating my teeth. And he's a sweet boy. And honestly, I think we put him in his kennel for 2 days, and then we left him out, and he hasn't really been any trouble since. Well, okay, maybe one more time. He got in the trash about 2 days ago and ate pork chop bones, which we were like, I mean, we were hoping he had buried them somewhere in the house because he likes to bury stuff in our blankets, but nope. He had flat out eaten them. And then about 24 hours later, they started coming out. And I mean, he had to work so hard, bless his heart. They were coming out like rocks. They were totally ground up bone. I'm so thankful to Jesus. He didn't tear up anything of his insides. He's fine. There was no blood. We had to examine them all. Crazy. Crazy what you do for dogs. But he's a good dog. We love him so much. He's very loyal. He's kind. He's not super friendly. Like, he doesn't just waddle up to everybody who bends down to say hi to him. He's like kind of standoffish. And then he will warm up to you, but you have to kind of ignore him and let him work his way towards you, and then he's fine. But that's him, Zacapa. He's a good dog. Now, then I know this is the long one. I'll try to make this quick. Another day at work. I had a long day, about a 12, 14-hour day. You guys know what that's like. So I got done at work, and in order to go home, I was cutting through the pub. I'd worked the cafe, so I'd coming out of the pub, I said goodbye to the bartenders, and then I walked through the pub, and a couple, there was loud music. We had a really big band in there, and a couple at the end of the bar, she calls me over. She's like, "Hey, Bob." So I walk over, and I'm like, "Hey." I recognized them. I'd, got them some fries and a burger or something earlier in the afternoon, and I was like, "How you guys doing?" They're like, "Oh, we're doing good." I was like, "Awesome. Well, have a great evening." And then she's like, "No, Bob, come here." I was like, "Okay, what's up?" She looked at me dead on the eye. She goes, "Do not come to work stoned tomorrow." And I was like, "Wait, what?" I leaned in because it was loud. I wanted to make sure I heard. She goes, "Yeah, don't come to work stoned. Don't do it." I was like, "Wow." I said, "When did you think I was stoned?" She said, "Today. You remember us? You've made us a burger and fries." I was like, "Yeah, I remember that." She goes, "Yeah, well, nobody's that happy." I was like, "Oh my gosh." I said, "That's so funny." I said, "I actually have never been stoned in my life. I've never been stoned in my life." But I said, "That's funny. I was not stoned." I said, "Honestly, I just have a lot of joy in life." And I was cracking up the whole time. And she just kind of looked at me, and I looked at her, and I told her, have a great night. I was like, hey, listen, I'm making the pancake breakfast in the morning. Feel free to stop by. Opens at 8. I'll see you there. And I walked away. I just thought that was so interesting. You know, that somebody who just probably doesn't spend a lot of time around joy figured it had to be drug induced. There was no way to naturally come out this happy unless you had, chemically enhanced yourself. Oh, glory. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this story. These are Bob's stories instead of Bob thoughts. Hope you guys had a great time today. Hope you enjoyed the episode. I'll talk to you again next week on the Epic Narrative.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to this podcast on any platform you use. You can also reach out to Bob for questions or booking at thebobswitzer.com or email him at thebobswitzer@gmail.com. See you next week, guys.